The Elf and the Stone of Time. In the twilight hours, when the air lay thick with evening mist and the forest settled into a hush, Lirian moved carefully along a narrow, winding path. The world around him was softened, veiled by the fading light and thick canopy above. Shadows stretched long, weaving into patterns upon the forest floor as he searched for herbs, guided by faint glimmers of silver light that seeped through the leaves. It was then, in the midst of his foraging, that something curious caught his eye. Half buried in a bed of moss, nestled beneath a gnarled root, was a stone, a small, unassuming gem barely the size of a walnut. Its edges were smooth, worn as though it had travelled far and long. When he lifted it, it pulsed with a gentle warmth, its surface awash with colour that shifted from deep green to blue, a mesmerizing ripple that seemed to mirror the changing skies. Lirian turned the stone over in his hand, its smoothness cool, and yet somehow alive, humming with a rhythm that was faint yet unignorable. He could almost feel it breathe, its colours swelling and receding like the ebb and flow of a hidden tide. The green faded into an ethereal blue as night fell, and with it came a tugging in his heart, a feeling of strange familiarity, though he was certain he had never seen this stone before. He tucked it carefully into his pouch, the weight of it oddly comforting against his side as he made his way back to the village. Yet even as he moved through familiar trails, he felt a pull from the stone, a silent beckoning call, as though it held within it the secret of something old and long hidden. A fragment of the world he could sense but not yet see. When he arrived at the village, the stone's colours had deepened into a shade of indigo, like the sky at midnight. He found himself reluctant to set it down, its steady warmth a reminder of something distant yet urgent. Curious whispers rose among his fellow elves as they caught sight of the stone, but none spoke of it openly, and Lirian kept it close, hoping for a sign. It was later that evening, in the presence of the village elders, that the stone's mystery began to unfurl. The eldest among them, Elder Reinhall, approached him, her wise eyes narrowing as they fell upon the stone, now resting in his palm like a living ember. She motioned for him to join her by the flickering fire, her voice low, as if the darkness itself might overhear. "That stone," she began with a slight tremor, "is no ordinary gem. It is a stone of time." Lirian felt a chill run through him, a thrill that quickened his pulse as the elder's words unfurled like the pages of an ancient book. A stone of time. He had heard of them only in whispers, fragments of stories passed down through generations, tales nearly lost to memory. Elder Reinhard's voice dropped even lower as she continued. "In ancient days, it is said, stones like these marked the hours in the lost city of Alirith. They guided its people, showing them the secrets of the skies, the passage of days and years. But that city is long forgotten, hidden by mountains, lost to all but a chosen few. This stone, it has found its way to you, as if reaching out from across ages. But why me? Lirian asked, his voice barely a murmur. I am no elder. I hold no great knowledge. The elder's eyes softened, a flicker of mystery dancing in their depths. Perhaps it is not knowledge it seeks, but curiosity, she replied. For the journey to Alirith is perilous, a path of shifting lands and hidden dangers, where only those who follow the stone's call may enter. And those who return, she paused, her gaze steady and distant, come back changed. Lirian's heart stirred. He could feel the stone's warmth growing, its colours shifting once more, a faint hint of violet now, as if it too understood the elder's words. This stone was calling him, urging him towards something beyond the bounds of his world, a place veiled in secrecy and shadows. As he sat by the fire, gazing into the stone's depths, the air seemed to thicken, the flames casting wavering shapes that danced with a life of their own. The thought of a hidden city, a place lost to time, filled his mind like a vision. He imagined streets lined with shadows, towers blanketed by mists, and a silence deeper than memory. He looked back to the elder, her face etched with wisdom and something he could not quite decipher. If I go, he asked, his voice softer than a whisper, what will I find? Elder Rinhal's gaze was steady, yet there was a glimmer of something enigmatic in her eyes. Only time can reveal that, she answered, her words as cryptic as the stone itself. And as Lirian held the stone close, he felt that time, ancient, flowing, and alive, was already beginning to shift. Lirian could hardly sleep that night. The stone seemed to cast its glow even through his closed eyelids, its colours shifting as if it held dreams within its depths. Whispers of the elder's words echoed in his mind, fragments of a forgotten legend stirring like autumn leaves in a breeze. A lost city hidden in the mountains, where time lingered like a breath held just before dawn. These thoughts filled him with a longing he could not place, a need to uncover secrets that lay buried beyond the familiar world he knew. As the first light of morning threaded through the trees, Lirian sought out the elders once more, drawn by a hunger for answers. He found them gathered beneath the ancient oak, their faces grave as though they too were reliving memories that had long lain dormant. Elder Rinhal motioned for him to join them. "You are here because the stone has called you," she said softly, her voice low with reverence. The others nodded, their eyes resting upon him with a mixture of caution and wonder. "You carry a piece of Alirith with you, a city whose name we dare not speak often, for it belongs to another age, another world." At the mention of Alirith, a shiver passed through the circle. The elders exchanged looks, each seeming to weigh the words before releasing them, as though speaking of the city might summon something ancient and dangerous. Lirian leaned forward, his gaze fixed upon the elder's face. "What happened to it?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Elder Rinhal's eyes were shadowed, her gaze far away. Alirith was once a city of great knowledge, a place where the very pulse of the earth could be heard, where the stars whispered their secrets to those who listened. It was said that the people of Alirith were guardians of time itself, keepers of a wisdom that was neither of the past nor the future, but something far beyond. She paused, her fingers tracing patterns in the air, as though drawing from the memories that hung around them like mist. But something changed. No one knows exactly what, but the city fell silent. It withdrew into the mountains, vanishing into a place where time was kept still, its gates closing to all who would enter. Only the stones remained, relics of a forgotten world, left to drift into the hands of those who might one day remember. The elders nodded solemnly, their expressions distant, as if recalling shadows of their own. Lirian felt a weight settle upon him, an understanding that this journey was not merely a path to a place, but a calling to uncover what had been lost, to awaken memories that lay sleeping beneath layers of time. Elder Mirin, an elder with a voice like rustling leaves, spoke next. "It is said that the stones hold the memory of Alirith, that they guide only those with a heart open to mystery, those willing to accept the unknown. The path you will take, Lirian, is one of silence and shadows. Alirith is hidden, veiled by both time and secrecy. To follow it means entering a realm where answers do not come easily, where each step reveals more questions than it answers." Lirian could feel the weight of their words settling upon him like a cloak. He was no great warrior, no wise scholar. He was simply an elf with a hunger for something that eluded him, a calling he could not name. Yet, as he looked at the stone in his hand, its colour shifting now to a deep, unknowable blue, he knew he was bound to follow where it led. Elder Reinhard's eyes softened, though her face held an expression of caution. "There are no maps to Alirith," she warned. "Only the stone will guide you. Watch it closely. It will speak to you in colours, in hues of dawn and dusk, guiding you through the forest and mountains. But remember, each step is a trust, a leap into what you cannot see. Alirith is not a place found with logic or force. It is a place found with patience and a heart open to wonder." Lirian felt a thrill of anticipation, a whisper of destiny stirring in the quiet space between them. The world seemed to slow as he glanced at the stone, its hues now shifting into shades of deep, mysterious green, like the forest at twilight. He knew, without understanding how, that his journey had already begun. As he rose to leave, Elder Rinhal took his hand, her grip both firm and gentle. "Lirian," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. When you find Alirith, remember that it is not only the city that is hidden, but something within yourself as well. This path will reveal both, if you are willing. The forest watched silently as Lirian left the village, the stone's colours guiding him into the shadowed trails beyond. The world seemed quieter now, as though holding its breath, as he began his journey into the heart of mystery and legend, where the whispers of Alirith lay waiting, veiled by time, hidden in the silence of forgotten tales. The path lay before Lirian like a ribbon woven from dusk and dawn, a whisper of something just beyond sight. As he journeyed deeper into the wilderness, the stone guided him, its shifting hues lighting his way like the forgotten glow of distant stars. He walked in silence, listening to the sounds of the forest around him, yet feeling as if he moved in another world, a world hidden just beyond the veil of ordinary sight. The stone's colours shifted as he moved, marking the hours with a rhythm that was not bound to the sun or the turning of the seasons, but seemed instead to respond to some otherworldly pulse. At times, it pulsed a pale green, soft as morning mist, leading him through dense groves of trees, their trunks twisted and ancient, roots coiling beneath his feet. He followed the stone's light as if it were the lantern of a hidden guide, casting its glow upon secret trails invisible to ordinary eyes. Days passed, though he lost track of time in any conventional sense. The colours of the stone became his only measure of the hours, deepening into shades of violet at dusk, shimmering in amber at noon, and paling into silver at midnight. It was as if the stone were translating the language of time itself, whispering to him the secrets of forgotten hours, guiding him ever onward. One evening, as the stone's colour softened into a deep indigo, he found himself on the edge of a vast, mist-shrouded valley. Shadows stretched long across the land, and a heavy silence pressed down around him. The valley seemed to breathe, its fog swirling in strange patterns, as if guarding something sacred and ancient. Lirian felt the weight of history in the air, a presence that watched him from behind the mists. The stone in his hand grew warm, its colour intensifying as if encouraging him to continue. He descended into the valley, his footsteps hushed by thick layers of moss that muffled every sound. The world around him was drenched in twilight, an endless moment between day and night, where the boundaries between things grew faint and uncertain. As he walked, he began to notice shapes half hidden in the fog, faint outlines of forgotten statues, figures frozen in poses of reverence, hands clasped over their hearts or raised toward an unseen sky. A sense of awe filled him, mingling with a subtle fear that prickled at the back of his neck. These statues seemed to watch him, their stone faces blank yet strangely alive, as if they bore witness to every traveller who dared to tread this path. The stone in his hand glowed brighter, its colour shifting to a shade of crimson, and with it came a pulse of warmth. a reassurance, a reminder that he was meant to be here, that he was following the path as it had been laid before him. Further into the valley, he came upon an ancient archway, half buried in vines, its surface etched with symbols he could not decipher. The stone in his hand seemed to respond to the symbols, its colour deepening into a rich golden hue that illuminated the symbols just enough for him to trace their patterns with his fingertips. The symbols thrummed beneath his touch, as if vibrating with a life of their own, guiding him forward with a silent, timeless language. Passing beneath the arch, he felt a shift in the air, a subtle difference, as if he had crossed an invisible threshold. The fog grew denser, curling around him like a living thing, wrapping him in a cocoon of silence. The trees grew taller and stranger, their trunks shimmering faintly with the light that came from within, like veins of silver running through ancient wood. He felt as though he had entered another world, one that moved at its own pace, untethered from the familiar cycles of his homeland. The stone in his hand began to pulse more rapidly, its colours shifting in rapid succession, from the soft blue of dawn to the fiery orange of sunset, then to a shade of violet so deep it bordered on darkness. Each colour seemed to echo a time he could not name, as if the stone were counting down to some unknown revelation, marking the final moments before a mystery unfolded. Then, just as the stone's colours settled into a steady moonlit silver, the mist parted, revealing a sight that took his breath away. Before him lay a narrow path winding down a steep mountainside, carved from smooth, polished stone that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Far below, he could see the glimmer of something vast and ancient, a city shrouded in shadow, its towers rising like spectres against the darkened sky. He had found it. Alirith, the city lost to time, hidden beyond the reach of mortal sight. Its towers were veiled in twilight, walls blanketed by thick vines, statues half buried in shadows. It was a place both forgotten and preserved, as if caught in a single, eternal breath. Lirian felt a tremor in his hand as the stone's glow softened, fading into a shade of blue that matched the distant, fog-covered city. The path was clear now, and he knew without a doubt that the stone had led him to the very edge of the forgotten world it once belonged to. He took a breath, his heart thrumming with anticipation, and stepped onto the path, descending into the mysteries of Alirith, where the whispers of time lay waiting in the silence of ancient stones. The air in Alirith was thick with silence, the kind that settles deep, like dust in a place long untouched. Lirian walked slowly, his footsteps barely making a sound on the smooth stone streets that wound like a labyrinth through the heart of the forgotten city. Shadows stretched long and deep here, casting strange shapes along the ancient walls, forms that seemed to shift and breathe as he moved. Each corner held a mystery, each shadow a secret, as though the city itself watched his every step. Alirith was not a ruin as he had expected, but rather a place frozen in time, preserved as though the entire city had drawn a single breath and held it forever. Buildings with tall, graceful arches lined the streets, their facades etched with symbols and carvings that told stories beyond his understanding. Some structures loomed tall and proud, their spires piercing the twilight sky, while others crouched low, half covered in creeping vines that glowed faintly with an inner light. Lirian could feel the weight of history here, a heaviness that settled over his shoulders like a cloak. The stone he held had faded to a deep, dreamlike indigo, its light dim but steady, as if respecting the solemn silence of the city. It no longer guided him forward, but seemed content to rest in his hand, allowing him to explore the hidden world at his own pace. He felt as though he had become part of the city, woven into its fabric of memory, a silent witness to secrets buried in shadow and dust. As he wandered, he came upon statues that lined the streets, silent figures carved from stone, each posed in quiet reverence. Some held out their hands as though offering invisible gifts, while others gazed upward, their faces softened with expressions of wonder. Lirian felt as though they were guardians, frozen in an act of devotion, their stone eyes watching over Alirith with an unyielding loyalty. The faces were serene, yet they held a trace of sorrow, as if they had been left here as a memory of those who once called this place home. In the heart of the city, Lirian found himself before an immense fountain, now dry and silent, its basin lined with the same intricate carvings he had seen along the streets. At the fountain's center stood a statue of an ancient figure, cloaked and hooded, holding a larger stone that mirrored the one in Lirian's hand. This stone, however, was dark, a deep, endless black that seemed to absorb the faint light around it. Drawn by a strange compulsion, Lirian reached out and touched the dark stone. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, a tremor ran through him. A sudden flood of images that flickered like shadows in his mind. He saw glimpses of Alirith as it once was, bathed in light, filled with voices and laughter. The people moving through the streets with a purpose he could not understand. He felt the weight of their knowledge, the wisdom they had held so carefully, a legacy now lost to the silent city around him. And then, the vision shifted. He saw the fall of Alirith, not with war or violence, but with a quiet withdrawal, a folding into itself as though it had chosen to slip from the world. He saw figures standing in silence, holding the stones that marked the passage of time, watching as their city faded from the world's memory, becoming nothing more than a legend. Lirian felt their sorrow, a sorrow so deep it seemed to seep into his very bones. The vision faded, leaving him standing once more before the fountain, the stone in his hand now pulsing faintly in response. It glowed with a shade of blue so deep it was almost black, mirroring the hue of the larger stone held by the statue. The two stones resonated together, and he felt in that moment a connection to this place, a bond that spanned the ages, binding him to the city's lost inhabitants and their unspoken history. As he turned to leave the fountain, he noticed a faint path leading away, lined by tall, silent columns that reached skyward like trees frozen in mid-growth. The air grew cooler, the silence deeper, as he followed the path to the edge of the city. Here he found a doorway, its arch shrouded in a thin layer of mist that seemed to pulse faintly, as if breathing. Beyond the doorway lay a garden, overgrown and wild, yet still touched by the faint glow that suffused all of Alirith. Strange silver-blue flowers bloomed in clusters, their petals shimmering like starlight. Lirian felt a sense of peace here, a quiet reverence that eased the sorrow lingering from his vision. The garden was a place of rest, a sanctuary untouched by time, as if Alirith had left one final gift for those who sought it. He knelt and placed his stone among the flowers, feeling a strange reluctance, yet knowing it was right. As he did, the colours of the stone faded, merging with the light of the flowers, as if it were returning to the city that had birthed it. Lirian felt a warmth in his chest, a soft, silent farewell, as though the city itself were thanking him for remembering, for witnessing its story. With a final look at the garden, he turned back to the silent streets, feeling the weight of Alirith's memory within him. He had come seeking a city lost to time, and he would leave bearing its secrets, its mysteries bound to his heart. Lirian lingered at the edge of Alirith, feeling the city's quiet presence settle within him. He had come searching for answers, and though Alirith had revealed some of its mysteries, others remained locked away, hidden in the shadows of its silent streets. The path back through the city felt different now, as if the stones and statues whispered farewells too faint for words, a final echo of the lives that once breathed there. As he reached the place where he had first glimpsed the city, he felt an unexpected pull toward the fountain he had visited before. Though he had placed his stone among the flowers in the garden, a faint glow beckoned him back to the heart of Alirith, like the last embers of a fire refusing to fade. Returning to the fountain, he saw that the dark stone held by the statue had begun to glow, shifting through colours just as his own stone once had. Shades of deep indigo, midnight blue and silver rippled across its surface, casting soft reflections onto the fountain's dry basin. Lirian stepped closer, feeling the pull of the stone's light, an unspoken invitation to reach out one last time. As his hand hovered over the stone, a pulse of warmth radiated from it, and a new vision bloomed in his mind. A vision not of the city's past, but of himself. He saw his own journey from the moment he had first held the stone in the forest to his discovery of Alirith. Yet woven within these memories were glimpses of other faces, other hands that had held stones like his, each bearing the same expression of awe and wonder. The vision expanded, revealing a chain of travelers stretching across ages, all drawn by the same call, each one bound to Alirith by a thread of silent memory. He understood now. The stone had not merely been a guide to Alirith. It had been a memory keeper, a fragment of the city's soul, passed down through countless hands. Each traveller who had found it had added their own story to the city, binding themselves to its hidden history. In touching the stone, Lirian had become part of that lineage, a keeper of Alirith's secrets, chosen to carry its legacy forward. The vision faded, leaving him once more in the silent heart of the city. He looked at the stone in the statue's hand, now pulsing with a soft, steady light. It seemed to recognize him, as if acknowledging the part of himself he was leaving behind. He understood that the stone's journey was complete, that it no longer needed to guide another. Its colors slowed, dimming to a quiet, contented glow, as if preparing to rest. Feeling a deep sense of peace, Lirian bowed his head in silent reverence, allowing the city's memory to settle within him, merging with his own. He knew he could never truly leave Alirith behind. Its presence would stay with him, woven into the fabric of his being, a quiet echo that would follow him through every shadowed forest and sunlit glade. Turning to leave, he felt a subtle shift, as if the city itself had exhaled, releasing him back into the world. As he walked away, he glanced over his shoulder one last time, seeing Alirith's towers fade into the mists, the statues watching with eyes that seemed both ancient and wise. The city grew faint, its outlines blurring, until it was nothing more than a memory, a whisper on the edge of a reality. Lirian emerged from the valley as the first light of dawn spilled over the mountains, the world brightening as if waking from a deep sleep. In his hand, he no longer held the stone, yet he felt its presence in his heart, a gentle warmth that reminded him of his journey and the secrets he now carried. He knew that he would return to his village changed, with a story that was both his own and part of something far older, woven into the timeless fabric of Alirith's memory. As he stepped back onto the forest path, he felt a quiet certainty, an understanding that he too was now a part of the legend. And perhaps, one day, others would follow the stone's call, guided by whispers of Alirith and the silent guardians who watched over its hidden streets. In the dawn's light, Lirian walked onward, carrying with him a city out of time, a legacy of secrets veiled in twilight, bound forever to the rhythm of his heart.